Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks, everyone, for joining our Public Sector AI webinar. Today, excited to have everyone on the call, excited to have our panelists. We're going to be talking about improving operational results and efficiency using AI with a focus on data. Yes, I know people still think data is easy, but it has a habit of messing up your AI initiatives if not done right. So we'll address some of the aspects of best practices there for the audience today. We have an amazing panel, a lot of practitioners. I'll introduce them in a second. But first to our aim is to provide everyone with a handful of actionable best practices that you can start using in your organization and job starting today. Hopefully, we have a lot of topics to get through today, but we very much welcome questions. So please use the chat at the bottom or side of your screen to post questions. And then in order to get everyone CPE certification, we'll have 3 survey questions during the webinar. So please answer those as we go through those. At the end of this session, over the next either tomorrow or Monday, we'll post a rebroadcast on YouTube, and then we'll do a quick summary of the webinar. So if you've registered, we'll be sending that out to everyone. So let's jump in. We have 4 amazing panelists who are in the thick of AI, working with federal agencies. I'll do a quick intro, and then we'll jump into the questions. I'll ask panelists to maybe give a little more on the background as we go through each question. Monica Youngman, Chief Scientist with the National Weather Service and NOAA, longtime NOAA leader and Blue Devil. Bridget Carper, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Architecture, Engineering, Technology, and Innovation with the Department of Energy, along with HUD and also in working with industry. Also a Duke Dog and Marymount Saint. Dr. Justin Iannello, Chief Digital Health, Artificial Intelligence, and Health Informatics Officer at VA, longtime health practitioner, leader, and Casey Rue. He's been at 5 other schools. So I didn't want to list all 5 or 6 mascots. And then last but not least, Philippe Milan, Public Sector Go-to-Market Lead at OpenAI, Amazon and Lockheed alum, and also Blue Devil and Gator. All right, so let's jump into it. Excited to have everyone on the call. First question, referring to the importance of data. RAND had a really interesting research report kind of late last year, citing that AI projects are failing at twice the level of your normal IT project. Not totally unexpected because it's a new technology and a lot of people are getting comfortable with it. That said, they did cite data quality and not articulating the problem correctly that's being solved as 2 of the main drivers to that. So how do you know if you have a project, big or small, where data is setting you up for success? Let's start with Dr. Iannello.
All right, well, first off, Michael, thank you for having me. You can all hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So it's no surprise that this article happened to come out mentioning that, first off, as we know, organizationally, none of this is easy. And when we talk about people, process, technology, organizational culture, AI is not exactly going to fix that. So what it comes back to is, how is our organization set up to be able to appropriately manage AI? With that said, is when we talk about the different examples as far as data goes, of course, we know when we have validated, accurate data, it could really help us out a lot, taking us in the right direction. But if for whatever reason it's biased or inaccurate, the problem then gets compounded in this case. So an example I can give from healthcare, for example, we're in the clinical setting and a number 50 gets entered into the electronic health record system. That can mean many different things to the clinician. 50 could be a relatively normal, stable number if we're talking about heart rate, especially if somebody's on a heart rate blocking medication. However, 50, if let's say it's a respiratory rate, means something entirely different, where somebody could perhaps be in acute respiratory failure requiring intensive care unit support. Now, if we train the AI model on this data, the AI model might not necessarily know what that number 50 represents and what it needs to communicate. So we could have a situation where it over-exaggerates a situation, or even worse, doesn't alert the clinical provider to a situation that is actually very clinically serious and needs to be addressed immediately.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Ainello. Bridget, what's your view?
I agree totally with what Justin has. Accuracy is definitely one of the main piece. To add to that, I would add is completeness, because we have a concern right now at Department of Energy where we have a lot of data, but it's not a complete data set. So we are missing some of the important fields. And in some cases, it's around how we inconsistently label, and each system has their own different terminology. And so the combination of completeness and consistency of setting those standards. And so as we're building any of our new models, we're ensuring that we are consistent with how we're calling items. For example, with ours, it's automobile, auto, or car. And so as we're looking at our fleet management, having those different terminologies, we were deflating like the overall what we actually had in our population. And so those are some of the like quick areas that we could see how having data, but not having complete or consistent data could harm how you're actually making decisions on.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. And Monica, NOAA's been one of the leaders in developing AI and using AI over the last few years. Definitely a target-rich environment from a data perspective. What's your view?
Yes, we definitely have a lot of data. And I don't want to step back for a moment, because when we're talking about AI, we're talking about an extremely large umbrella of different types of work, right? And within NOAA, we have a lot of data, and we've been using the basic forms of AI in the form of machine learning for decades. And so when we look at moving into the advanced AI techniques, we can use the lessons learned from these basic prediction models on how do we use the right data for the right problems. And so just to add to what's already been said, figuring out what data you need, how complete it needs to be, how accurate it needs to be, I think comes back to what is the problem you're trying to solve, and being very clear about that up front. Especially in NOAA, we have so much data, it can be, do we just throw everything at the problem, but then, it's not all consistent. And so narrowing it down to what we actually need is one of the challenges, and that starts with defining the problem. And with defining the problem that you're trying to solve is identifying who the users are going to be and what are you helping them do ultimately. And then bringing those stakeholders, those users in can help you define what's the data you need to solve that problem. So I'll just quickly share an example from the Weather Service. We have an AI project. It's a partnership with the AWS Generative AI Innovation Center. And we're trying to become more efficient at producing local storm reports. These are reports that our forecasters produce with every event. They look at lots of different data inputs, from social media to phone calls to the office, to their emergency management partners, and then they write up these local storm reports. But it's very time intensive. And so we have a large volume of local storm reports, but that's not the data we needed to train an AI system. What we needed was the input-output pairs. What was the input? What was the social media report? And then what was the LSR that the human wrote? And so we actually had to go back and took about 6 months and 15 volunteers to create that data set of 400 pairs, about 400 pairs. And we were able to be really successful there. So bringing in those users, looking at what data you have, where are those gaps, and then filling those in, so that you're targeting the right gaps, I think is what I would add.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. And actually, you touched on 2 points of articulating the problem effectively and looking at the data sets available. In Bridget, in our prep call, I think you're the only person I've talked to really has described having a specific business analysts to assess your data readiness. And I thought that was like a great example to share with the audience today. Can you provide a few details on that?
I can. I was thinking the same thing, Mike. I was like, oh, Monica's answering the next piece of how one of the challenges we had and how we brought in a business analyst to help solve some of those. And what we were finding is it was hard for the technical developers to understand the business mission challenge. And so we have a business analyst that's able to translate the mission requirements, what is actually the issue, and then to be able to say, this is the types of data that we need and narrow it down. So they're like the middle person between business person that lives this item that they can explain to anyone versus the technical group that needs to do it. So it was able to not only decrease the timeline for us to be able to provide some of those services, but to able to determine which data was not readily available and where that came from, because then we were putting in a repository. And so the comms now, it's like just like goes very well. It's like, okay, we have this concern. We're going to send in our BA to talk to any of the functional users. Then they translate that for technical. And then what we've seen is that approval goes very quickly with the workflow of capturing that. And then we also have seen it for small areas, but then as we're doing modernization, being able to leverage those documented requirements have been very successful for us.
That's great. That's really helpful, Bridget. There's a lot of news from OpenAI, last week, and it's great having Philippe on the call. I'll kind of start off with a theme I've heard from different federal agencies, at least their AI and technical leaders, talking about getting your agency and the whole team comfortable with AI. So unlike a lot of technologies that kind of get locked away within offices of information technology, AI obviously has like a huge consumer component to it. And I think there's a belief that getting more and more of the team using, or your staff using generative AI across the board can be helpful. But does that mean you're really paying people to, do restaurant reviews and travel bookings while at work? And now there's Chat GPT for $1. Maybe let's start with Philippe, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael. So obviously a lot of thoughts. Well, maybe I'll frame it a lot. So in my role, I speak to a lot of different agency leaders on AI adoption. And from our perspective, or at least the way I frame it, thinking about AI adoption within an organization should really have, your AI strategy should have two parts. You need a bottoms up strategy and you need a tops down strategy. And the bottoms up strategy goes to what you alluded to. So today, generative AI is a tool that is widely used in the consumer market. So today we have 700 million weekly active users of ChatGPT. That's roughly 10% of the world's population that is using ChatGPT every single week. So pretty astonishing. So people are experiencing that in their consumer lives and saying like planning finding a good restaurant or writing an, birthday party invitation, whatever it might be, and then saying, oh, well, this is super helpful for this, or in some more serious cases, like using it for healthcare support and saying, well, this would actually be very helpful for me in a work context. And I would love to write my emails, or I am working on a request for proposal that I am writing, and I would love to actually iterate that with AI. And so there's a lot there that is like people see the need. And one of the biggest barriers has been authorization and adoption and ensuring that these tools are fully approved for use. And that's why you saw us, OpenAI, make an offer and a partnership with GSA to ensure all federal agencies have access to an offer of ChatGPT, or enterprise version of that, for $1 per agency. And then GSA just announced today their US AI initiative to really start making AI testing more broadly available. But we are big supporters of that, of just kind of how do you bottoms up enable the workforce to leverage AI. And so I really think of that as a top down. In order to be successful there, it's really about enabling a technology and then creating the right training, guardrails, kind of user community groups, et cetera, and just allow people to experiment and try in all sorts of different use cases. I juxtapose that to actually the top down use case. And actually, I think Monica gave a phenomenal example from the Weather Service, saying like, here's the local storm reports and what I have to write. And here's something that could be augmented using artificial intelligence. And so this process that we have to do, we have to go build something unique for that. And what I've seen is that top down process it takes a little bit of a different skill set and mindset and strategy to be successful. What you need there is less of a general purpose tool that's available to everybody. What you need is a smaller kind of tiger team who know the problem set really well and know how to build with these AI tools, because they're going to build something bespoke for your organization that you're not just going to be able to buy off the shelf. And so you're going to have to go work with partners, whatever it might be, and build something unique, like kind of like this, the local storm reports. And so really, but you have to think about both of these strategies together. You need to have a bottoms up, just enable access, make it authorize the tool in the right way, and then bring it to your organization. And then also have a tops down strategy where you're thinking about what are the things that are the mission of our agency and the things that we have to do to deliver value to the American people, and how do we do that better with AI. And so how do you build things? And that's much more of like a builder model. I'm going to have to work with partners to kind of build something bespoke. And then separately, how do I bottoms up just enable a whole workforce to leverage AI and really just start using it in all sorts of different use cases?
I love the analogy of the top down versus the bottom up. Bridget, you had given a couple of examples in our prep of a little bit of the democratization of AI, talking about use cases within the labs. Are you a fan of that kind of broad use of Gen AI, across the entire spectrum of your agency?
I am. I think it's a great idea. And thanks, Felipe, for making it something affordable for us, because that was part of our adoption is they were using it in their personal life. And we were saying with the government budget process, 2 years ago, we didn't factor in funding to be able to get some of these tools. And we knew that, unfortunately, if we didn't make tools available, they were going to forward it to their personal email against our CISO and any of our cyber rules and still use it. And so that is one of the things that makes it great, that we do have like some of that. And it's about literacy. Yes, there are going to be a few that are using it for non-work purposes, but we're finding majority of the users with limited resources are using it to help do their work quicker and more efficiently. And so we love getting that feedback. And we've been doing like lunch and learns and demos and trainings to try to get them understanding that you don't have to, your point earlier, be within a CIO shop to write prompts. Like we're finding some of the best prompt engineers are actually our PA and some of our HC that does writing, not technical, because some developers are looking at it a little differently. But we're seeing like across the board a lot of use case examples that are around like different pieces that wouldn't automatically come to mind if something technology could help. But a lot of the automation and some of those things of processes that we can try to streamline and let us focus on some of the more sensitive things.
That's great, Bridget. And I can share within our own organizations, we work with large data sets and we're overlaying them on policy and contracting information within the public sector. We allow like a number of members of the team to take time on Fridays and kind of work on their own kind of fun projects, especially working with AI. And we're definitely seeing some good results of R&D and innovation coming from our own team. So I think there's a number of ways to come at this. Let's come back to you, Philippe, because you had a great line of gym muscles don't come from reading workout books, and you could probably apply that analogy to a lot of things. But you're sitting on top of a lot of usage data of Chat GPT. So if you can kind of share some like patterns of success you've seen in experimentation, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and the quote I use a lot again is you don't get fit by reading about working out. You have to go to the gym. And so in this world of AI, going to the gym is using AI. So obviously, I think a lot of folks attending and hearing the conversation, and I love the discussion around AI, but it's not a substitute for being hands-on and using AI. I come from a very biased perspective, and I think you should use ChatGPT because it's the best, but go use something. There's others out there as well. We have some competitors, and so we'll win in a competitive marketplace, but you should be using some sort of AI to see what is happening here. There's a lot of discussion, especially here in Washington, D.C., about AI policy, what it really means. But without being on the cutting edge, it's hard to understand where this is going. And you just have to, we do a lot of AI 101 presentations, and one of my colleagues has a slide that she loves to put up, which is everything you know about AI is out of date. And we love to put up that slide because it's accurate every single day. Because the rate of change and improvement of these foundation models, of these generative AI models, but from OpenAI and other labs, is really remarkable. So the things that AI was not able to do, even 3 months ago, maybe with the release of GPT-5 now can do that. With the release of a product like ChatGPT Agent can do that now. And so, especially, one way to think about it today is AI models, even, a year ago, were very good at like short horizon tasks. So if I had a question that needed a quick answer, I could probably get an AI model to probably either search the web for me very quickly, give me a response, or just kind of from its own kind of knowledge, predict a good response. Or if I needed help me draft something like a birthday letter for my wife or something, it would do a very good job of drafting something very short, etc. But doing longer horizon tasks, like actually I need you to go research all these different topics for me. And I'll share a very personal example that we've shared very publicly. My wife and I have navigated cancer over the last 9 months. So my wife 9 months ago was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer. And we've shared very publicly about kind of our story and specifically how we personally have used AI to help navigate a very personal moment like that, a very consequential moment for us. And really, like, initially it was helping just kind of take this very medical form in terms of a biopsy report and help just translate this into plain English. And so we can now understand what was happening, be better prepared, ask questions like what we should ask our doctor, and be much more prepared. But more recently, with things like deep research, we were able to say, we had a very specific decision we had to make in the course of her care, where we had to really understand pros and cons of a specific medical treatment, specifically in her case, whether it was to do radiation. And we were able to use deep research, which did, in 15 minutes, outputted a 30-page PDF for us that would have taken us, hours, if not days or weeks, to actually research all of the aspects. And we were able to read that and understand that and become more informed and make a better decision about our care and what specifically what my wife and the decision she wanted to make. But really, it's this pathway where you're seeing AI start to be able to do more and more and more. And that's because what us and other labs are building towards is really this concept of AGI, artificial general intelligence. So it is kind of magical that the same thing that I am using to help research whether to do radiation on breast cancer is the same thing that can help me, plan a shopping list for a birthday party, help me plan a trip to this. It will help me, review a proposal that I might be writing for a customer. It will help me, read my emails and review kind of, summaries and trends. So it's really general intelligence that can do all sorts of different things. And so that's what's really powerful about this technology. And that general purpose also makes it hard to stay up to speed. So again, the biggest thing I normally advise people is you just have to become a user of these frontier systems and really start understanding and playing with them. And again, that's what I would really push and advocate anyone listening today is to find ways to go take a free version of these tools. They all exist in a free capacity and just start using them. And then more importantly, hopefully, and again, where I'm very focused on is, well, how do we work with IT leaders at agencies to then remove barriers to make it centrally adoptable and authorizable so that if that's a word, so you can actually put government data, because that's really where you actually start seeing the benefit of it once they're authorized for use with the right classification of data.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks for sharing that personal story. Really, really helpful. I'll add, one thing just from everything about AI is changing. It's caused us to rethink our whole kind of product road mapping, where we're getting our technology team much more involved in knowing why we need a project and kind of the activities and the thoughts and strategy before something becomes a project, because AI technology is changing so quickly. Things that we attempted and failed at or not possible even 6 weeks ago, there can be a development with an AI technology where all of a sudden it's possible. So one of the upsides and challenges of that is now you need to get your development and software and data science teams more connected with the big picture and prioritization. And so I think ultimately that makes your organization a lot stronger, but that definitely requires a lot of communication, collaboration, and rethinking of your approach. And that's something we started working on, a number of months ago within Leadership Connect. So let's turn to Dr. Iannello. stick with analogies, AI as a child, you're talking about training models, and I really love that. I always think of it, having been involved in the SaaS space for a long period of time, just that plain old, iterative, culture of continually making something, better. Can you share your thoughts with the audience on that?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think what we all see is that people are our greatest asset. There's a lot of excitement surrounding AI, but it's only as good as our people that are training it, that are guiding it, almost like you said, an AI child that's exploring life. So an example I guess I can say is, let's say we have an AI model, a child in this case, and what we are basically inputting into the training model is that we want to make sure that the AI child doesn't injure themselves. So we say avoid sharp objects or avoid putting your fingers in the crack of a door. And we end up finding out that the AI model itself, the child in this case, ended up, let's say, burning themselves. And then we started to go back and kind of look at the model and say, well, maybe the model was too simplistic. Maybe we didn't necessarily include that clinical input point, what's called a feature. Or maybe we made the model too complex that the AI model did so well in the training data that when we put it in a new setting, it didn't do as well. So let's rewind again for a second and say that going back to this AI model child in this case, we do train it on avoiding, burning themselves on the stove. But we didn't teach it anything beyond avoiding that. And then we find out that the AI model ends up wearing oven mitts when it's touching the stove, to our surprise. And what we're starting to see in this case is that the AI model is starting to learn on its own. So I know this is a silly example as adults, but when I think about the potential by training these models in the right way, the potential for breakthroughs, just starting in healthcare, new drug discovery, genotype analysis, other industries, it's just tremendous. But again, it goes back to people being the greatest assets, and we are responsible for training and guiding these models appropriately.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Aiello. So you're touching on data, and data access was really a recurring theme we've heard within agencies across the board, but certainly came up in our prep calls. Maybe we'll go to Dr. Aiello and Monica, since you're sitting on these giant treasure troves of data, and certainly from a healthcare perspective, you have a lot of data privacy challenges. Like, how do you navigate data access and think about where it determines prioritization of projects?
Michael, who would you like to go first with that?
We'll go to you, Dr. Aiello.
Okay, sure thing. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Of course, data access can mean a lot of different things, but I think we're all living in an environment where we're not necessarily hurting for data, we're hurting for information. And certainly in healthcare settings, when it comes to projects that come our way, we don't always have the luxury to say we don't have the data, we're going to move on to something else. We're in a lot of high-risk settings, so we have to kind of tackle that head on. So going back to our conversations earlier, when I think about data, everything, as we've kind of talked about, goes back to organizationally, how are we built? How do we see data in AI? How is our governance structures in place? I've seen situations as simple as we don't have data access because people aren't talking to each other, and we have silos that have been built, and it's just a matter of getting people in the room. But then we might have other situations where perhaps we don't have enough expertise in wrangling the data, validating it, and so on. We also run into situations too where access that might be needed to this data comes with working with our vendors and working with other partners. Maybe new APIs need to be built or something along those lines. So I really just think, again, it goes back to who are we as an organization and what exact problem are we facing, and what is our gap analysis telling us, and how do we work together as a team in addressing that?
And Monica, you added in our prep calls just using social media and public source data. So maybe you kind of factor that into your answer as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I really see the data access is a huge problem, particularly for NOAA. We have a huge amount of data that's spread from the bottom of the ocean to the surface of the sun. And trying to manage all of that, get that all out in some sort of consistent way, we've struggled with. And so with AI, really opening so many opportunities, I think there's three ways that I kind of think about this. And one really gets to what we've been talking about, is the learning. How do we get projects going where we do have that data access, but we can learn, and then help prioritize which data we need to make more accessible. And that gets to what was just said too, is about providing that information rather than just the data. We also are working extremely hard to provide more public access to our data in a really consistent, open manner. So within NOAA, we have the NOAA Center for AI, as well as an active data governance community that are working together to expand the discovery and access to data, both environmental data as well as administrative data. So this includes creating AI-ready data standards, improving the data quality, expanding the metadata to really have AI actionable metadata with embedded confidence, and migrating data services to the cloud. I also want to highlight that we can use AI to find the missing data. And this is partially where the social media data comes in, is that there's areas where, while NOAA has a lot of data, we have blind spots, right? You just take the example of our radar data in the Weather Service. We have very good coverage for the US, but there are gaps. So how can we use AI to fill in those gaps efficiently to support everyone? Similarly, we have gaps of understanding how people use our watches and warnings. Are people getting the information? Do they know what to do? Are they taking action, let's say, in preparation for a hurricane? So this is where we could leverage AI to go collect that social media data to improve our mission delivery and really to save lives and protect property. So there's a huge opportunity for AI to support getting more data for our mission.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. And maybe I'll open this one up to the panel. So measuring success, because I think it's a really important, topic that, certainly doesn't just apply to AI projects, but, certainly there's, we're talking about, essentially the hammer looking for the nail when we start with AI and then kind of finish with the project. So I think figuring out the best ways to measure success to me is essential to getting adoption of the technology and further exploring, how AI can help an organization. And we'll start with you, Monica, 'cause, I think you brought this topic up first. Like, is this any different from any other project, or because the technology is new, like what are different considerations around measuring success?
Yeah, I think there's two ways I look at success and when we're going to test these projects. One is technical and the other is the end user decision making. And those two concepts I don't think are unique to AI, but there are unique considerations within those. So technically, does the system produce what we expect? That's the same question you'd ask for any system. But particularly with generative AI, you need to test that in a different way and make sure in different contexts, as was mentioned, if you put that child in a different situation, does it still produce what we want and what we need? So there's that technical aspect, including IT security, that really needs to be tested and a mark of success. Does that work? But the second aspect that I think is really crucial to AI projects is the end user decision making. The revolution in AI, I kind of equate to the beginning of the internet. When all of a sudden we got access to this trove of information, and we didn't know what to trust. We didn't know how to use it. And today it's very natural. We all kind of have a sense of what to use on the internet, what to trust, when not to trust it. But now with AI, we're going through that learning process all over again. So with any given AI project, how are the end users making a decision and using that system? Is it benefiting that decision making or their workflow? So I'll go back to the local storm report example I gave. We're about to start testing in the next really big, robust testing in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to be looking at those technical aspects. Like I said, does it produce something that is reasonable? We also want to look at our primary goal, which is efficiency. Are we actually gaining efficiency from using this, and how the user uses the system? And then finally, our secondary goal of trying to have a more complete picture of storm impacts. So really making sure that we're looking at how we're using it, and being able to train those users to really realize the outcomes that we're looking for.
Thanks, Monica. And Philippe, you're on the the other end of kind of measuring success. Like when you're in the room with an office or agency, like what do you see as best practices, and are you ever sitting there going, hey, that's an unreasonable expectation, or maybe you should be reaching for the moon a little more on your expectations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would actually go back to that analogy I gave earlier on AI strategy on, is this a top-down initiative or is this a bottoms-up? Because I would measure success very differently for each of those. And so for a top-down project, again, Monica, I'll keep picking on Monica's a great example of the kind of the local storm reports. Like there's very specific measurable outcomes, like how many people are notified, how fast they get them out, how the quality of them that maybe you measure from some sort of survey data after the fact. So there are maybe some very specific mission-oriented outcomes, and is AI helping you get to the better mission? So the goals there are not AI in and of themselves. It's much more about the goal of the project or the mission, the objective you're trying to accomplish. When many times when we see kind of the bottoms up approach, however, kind of like, let me just broadly make access. One of the immediate ones is, well, some sort of time saved metric is usually a good thing of like, here's what I did, and here's what it would have taken. Here's how long it took me with AI, and if I would have done this on my own, here's how much longer it would have taken me. A good example there is like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we worked directly with Governor Shapiro's office, and they did a big formal study of ChatGPT Enterprise, and they provided it to over 200 government employees for a full year. And every week they surveyed and they measured, what was the usage, what was the responsive, and in aggregate, what they came back and said, on average, state employees were saving 95 minutes a day using ChatGPT. And some astonishing examples and other things, like one I'll give is specifically around hiring. So I'll get some of these numbers, specifics may be off, but the generally direction is correct. They were very focused on how fast can we bring in people to the state government, and it used to take them on average well over 3 months to hire someone into a state government role. And so one of the things they said is, we want to actually simplify job descriptions. So we want to simplify. They had 150, and we want to bring these down to a much more manageable number, and they ended up getting closer to 70 ish job descriptions. And initially they had budgeted a team that they were going to have, 7 or 8 people. They were going to pull them all from all their responsibilities for like a 2-month period to do nothing but sit and look at job descriptions and help get this down. And that's how they were planning budget for it. Well, they had one employee who said, I can do this with ChatGPT, and within a week, she finished the entire project, and she just her on it by herself. And then had a review and said, look, I was able to simplify all these job descriptions just by myself. We had budgeted all these people to do this work for this extended period of time. I was able to do it on my own. We reviewed it. Yep, this looks fantastic. This looks actually probably even better than we anticipated it would. And now they have their hiring down from, this plus other aspects of it down to 35 days, I think, to get someone enrolled, and they're trying to get it into sub a month. And so, it shows there's a lot of focus in AI around like, what's the use case? What am I going to do with this? And I think with some of this general purpose technology, you actually that is actually very important for the top-down use case. Like, what am I doing? What should I be focused on? I'm using resources that I'm only using here. I need to figure out what that use case is. But with the general purpose tool, you almost have to just put it into people's hands in an authorized right way with the right kind of guardrails and what you can use it for, and then just let them come up with what they're going to use it for. And then people will self-report, like, here's how amazing this is. And actually, some of the best metrics is when you give it to someone and you say, okay, well, you know what? Now, if this pilot period is done, I'm going to take it away. The amount that people fight you to say, no, I need to keep this tool, you cannot take this away from me, is actually a very good indicator of the value it's giving them. And so that is one of the things I'll point to. So there's a lot of ways to kind of measure success and think about it. Again, and I think very important when you're doing like a bigger project enabled by AI. But when you're doing this bottoms up project, it's more of just get people access right away, and you almost see like the benefits. Maybe the last quick story I'll share, because I love it, is out of the CDAO, the DoD, the Chief Data and AI Office. They had done a survey, say like, who wants to use AI in the DoD and why? And one of the groups that raised their hand was the Army chaplains. So the priest of the Army raised their hand and said, we want to use generative AI. And the guy that ran this project task force, Lima at the time, Captain Lugo, is like, all right, well, I'm going to meet with the chaplains. And he goes and he meets with the chaplain. He's like, well, why do you want to use AI? And they said, we wanted to write our sermons. And he kind of like looked back and he laughed. He's like, isn't that what you do here? Isn't that a core part of your job? Why would you want AI to do that? And the response was, our job is to care for the mental health of our service members. The less time I spend writing sermons is more time I can spend one-on-one with the service members that need my help. And I would rather be doing that. And he's like, look, and I'll review the output and I'll make sure it's in my own words, et cetera. But I wanted to write my sermons so I can go spend time one-on-one with these service members that really need my help. And I love that example because that was not an example that Captain Lugo out of the Pentagon and corporate headquarters and CDAO was going to like point to like who needs AI and find the chaplains out of that. That only came because you had a chaplain who knew AI from his personal life and knew what it could do and said, I want to bring it here and I want to do it. So I think there's so much of that. This fundamentally enable access, and you will see so much of the benefits rise and just kind of survey and talk to people and your users, your employee base on how they're using it. So again, that's really the way I think about it. And again, one of the reasons we did this big partnership with the GSA to just provide access is because we really think that will play out is just by people seeing what the power of it is at scale.
That's awesome, Kevin. But I really love the idea of like pairing, low tech surveys, so SurveyMonkey meets ChatGPT. That sounds like an awesome pairing. So those are, two great examples. I thought you were gonna have a punchline when you talked about a priest using ChatGPT, but maybe for after the webinar. Dr. Iannello, measuring success, anything you'd like to add?
I think those are two great points so far. And really what I'm hearing is you need to have a plan, because if we just throw AI into the mix and don't really think about what the process is, the workflows, how it affects people, it's not only going to be unsuccessful, but people are going to be disappointed along the way. I guess I'll just add a healthcare example to the conversation here, which is ambient dictation. Recently read a great publication, New England Journal of Medicine by the Permanente Medical Group, who I'm sure many are familiar with on the West Coast. And ambient dictation, which is based on natural language processing, being commonly used now. Let's say you have your app on your smartphone, you put it in the treatment room, patient provider are having a conversation. What it does is it picks up on that voice, puts it into a medical progress note, and saves a lot of time and allows more personal interaction between provider and patient. What really stuck out to me here, though, in this article was how they measured it. And one of those was that they ensured that there was peer-to-peer support. They made sure that their providers along the way had somebody to go to. Secondly, there was a lot of patient engagement that was involved too, patient pamphlets, kind of teaching them how the tool works. And then there was also some other measures as far as documentation, compliance, and quality goes. So you don't always see that. That might seem very obvious, but I think that is just a great blueprint, just taking ambient dictation, for example, that they had a plan and they executed it very well.
Excellent, thank you. And I think we're having a lot of success with this topic. Bridget, I know you covered a number of areas on this topic. Would you like to share any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think everyone had really good examples, and to build upon Felipe's statement, we're doing something similar where we're just asking because, again, those examples, we can come up with some, but there's a lot of that. Again, that's not our day job, and that we wouldn't be able to even ask them without just opening it up. So we do a lot of like listening sessions, and then we do for our users, for our enterprise, Julix, our chatbot, and Gen AI tools, it does like after your third login each month, asks you like, what do you like? What do you dislike? And one of the features that we're getting a lot is oh, the models, the timing of it. We need something that happened yesterday because that new executive order, my boss wants to know how does that impact us at DOE. And so that's how we were using grounding that's able to go one way out to pull some of the information. But as things are rapidly changing with a number of executive orders or requirements, we're noticing that non-policy writers or non-groups that are typically we're monitoring executive orders are concerned because they want to be in compliance, but they also don't have time to read the number of executive orders in the different pieces. So we did have like an EO Compass that does pull up each time there's a new executive order, what is that impact to DOE, and then that breakout for each user. So if you're already part of that community, it gives you that update. So then you're able to adapt to see, wait, we have something due in like 3 months, or we have something due in 30 days. And so it gives you like that flag. And again, it was just getting feedback because it was not anything that my team came up with. It was hearing that more than once. And we're like, okay, we could see how the value is. So it's listening to our customers as part of that takeaway of being successful.
Excellent. Thank you, Bridget. So a lot of the discussion has been, I would say, more rah-rah with AI, but in our prep, we did discuss risk aversion within agencies and some obstacles people are facing. And I'm going to work in our first question from our audience. So we had a question around what's the sentiment around agentic AI, especially within multi-agent systems. So that's the question. But I want to kind of deliver that, with the thought of, risk aversion, obstacles to moving forward on AI projects. Are there ways to, we've heard from, program managers who've created, techniques, at least within specific programs, of incentivizing risk-taking and working with new vendors and in trying new things. So it's obviously a challenge within federal agencies. Maybe we'll start with Bridget, with you, and if you want to address agentic AI adoption, please do.
Yes, risk aversion, we definitely have that. And we put it under our change management that every new technology, even like to Monica's earlier example around the internet, people were against it, it was the unknown. And so it's the change. And so part of what we found from our security group, our CISOs are definitely very risk adverse, and rightfully so, is how we could help and what is the challenge that we're overcoming. And so a lot of it is that logic when we are saying we should use agents to help with our help desk. First thought is like, no, it's going to mess with our customer experience. But once we are starting the testing and learning that, hey, they actually are doing it better than the humans. They don't get tired. They're able to do multiple at once, having our security group seeing that and hearing directly from the customer. So as we're building things, the first thought is, oh, we need to do a full security review. Is it FedRAMP? They're going through the laundry list of how we've done security in the past versus listening to what are the guardrails and restrictions of it being in our environment and being used heavily. So those are some of the things of including our security from the start to hear those challenges and requirements. So they're less likely to put up those hurdles as new tools and technologies coming out very rapidly.
Thanks, Bridget. And let's go to Monica. NOAA's been Leadership Connect. We track every dollar that every office spends, and I know NOAA is always at near the top of the list on AI spend, maybe next to DoD. So maybe you're not the most risk averse agency in the room. What are your thoughts? And again, if you want to work in and answer around agentic AI, that'd be great.
Certainly. Well, I will say that NOAA leans very forward in the research area of AI, and we definitely have risk aversion in our operational systems, especially for the National Weather Service. The trust in our data and our products and our messages it is critical because it directly influences public safety. So we have a lot of risk aversion there. I do look at this as two types of risk. There's the risk of using AI, and there's the risk of not using AI, right? there's the potential to cause harm if we don't use AI to scale, to reach more people, to make messaging more understandable and actionable. So I think it's important to look at both aspects. When I think about risk, we have within the agency like existing pipelines to manage risks. We have IT security, there's our CIO offices and people who like that's their job is IT security generally, right? And so with AI projects, that's a kind of a swim lane. You can work with known people. There's also the risk of how you design a system, the data, what data you use, what model you use, how you put it together. Maybe you're using something off the shelf, like ChatGPT. But if you're designing your own, what does that look like? And usually there's existing development processes and checks and balances there. But the third part of risk is, again, back to that user. How is someone going to use it and in what way? And that's the area where we're looking at new governance solutions of how can we evaluate that risk. And I'm a big proponent that if you can look at all three of these aspects and there's low risk, let's do it and let's try it. We have more to gain from moving forward into that space than there is to lose. I do want to, let's see, I'll mention two more things. One is that the local store report example that I keep going back to does actually use agentic AI, but it's contained within a system that has a human ultimately as the decision maker. But it does use a system of agentic AI that decides what data to look at to verify a report and makes those decisions on how to provide that back to the user and make that evaluation. In the end, it's still the forecaster's call about whether or not it's a true report and what goes in there. So we are starting to use agentic AI in basically controlled systems where there's still a human in the loop at the end. The final thing I'll mention, though, is, and this is really getting to Felipe's other aspect, is that bottoms up area is within NOAA. We've actually released a Gemini to the entire workforce. And yep, sorry, competitor here, but because NOAA uses the Google Suite, we were able to work within that existing contract. On July 1st, allowed all NOAA users to access Gemini within our workspace. And this, we went through a lot of risk evaluation here of, well, what if people misuse it, or what are the privacy concerns, So we started with a group of like about 200 testers across NOAA, got feedback, we were able to document, what are those use cases that work very well versus don't work very well, be able to document some of those privacy concerns and what data you can use and can't use. And then we were able to release that. And it's been such a game changer with lots of innovation, lots of new ideas. So that's very exciting. And I'd really encourage everyone who's like on that risk aversion scale and trying to hold back, is that there are ways to do this that can enable so much creativity and moving forward.
Well said. Thank you, Monica. And Felipe, you're, as go-to-market lead, you also have to substitute as chief objection handler. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of best practices around managing your risk. Any thoughts to share there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I'll share and the biggest risk in government that gets pointed to, for good reason, are the cybersecurity programs, right? There's a lot of cybersecurity programs in government, and how do we treat data? What data is allowed for a cloud-based access tool? That's most notably done in the FedRAMP program. And authorizing officials at any agency can authorize a tool. They just have to make a risk-based decision, understanding. So I think the biggest thing is it's been very easy to, there's been a lot of barriers. There's a lot of very easy ways of someone, very, very well-meaning individuals who are just like, hey, look, there's some risk here. I don't understand it yet. Let me not do this right now. and just say no at the moment. But I think, as Monica definitely said, that there's a risk of not doing anything, right? And it's just like these tools are available today, and there's a giant risk of not using AI or not providing an enterprise tool available, because many employees are going out of their way to just use it and not tell you, and that's actually a very big risk. And having that control and guardrails, even as companies like ours and others continue to get through the federal kind of compliance process, but ensuring what are the ways that you can ensure access in the right way and just start getting started, because again, massive risk to not doing it. On more of the agentic side as well, just to answer that question as well, there's a very important thing as you're building, whether you call it an agent, whether it's just kind of even a chat application use case of a risk-based decision. And I love to give a very, extreme example, but one of the customers I used to work a lot with was Fannie Mae, who works in the housing industry and, works a lot with approving mortgages. I would not say, here, ChatGPT, here's all the mortgage that's going into like our underwriting system. Do you approve this mortgage? Yes or no? That is a very high risk decision. There's a lot there. There's actually laws and regulations. Like you need to take a very high stakes decision like that very, very carefully. Juxtapose that to, let's say I want to take my cafeteria menu and change it from English into Spanish. I would blindly copy paste that into ChatGPT, take the output and just paste it straight onto my cafeteria without any human review, nor saying like someone needs to review this, etc. Because the downside of getting that wrong is maybe I get laughed at because I said, oh, you translated this as this, but it's actually this other thing. And so you have to do a risk-based decision because it's not that big of a challenge if it goes wrong. But there's a lot of decisions that aren't like that. Like there's some very high stakes decisions being made in government, and in which case you should be very cautious to have a human review. And that's where, some of the easiest guardrails or kind of pushes, like, well, ensuring your employee base knows that they do not get a pass just because AI helped them make a decision. You are still responsible for any decision you make or any email you send, whether or not AI helped you draft it. And I think just making that very, very clear really helps to say, okay, what should we be doing here? That being said, you might get enough benefits out of doing something that's like, well, you know what? Actually, we can do this at scale. So we actually should not actually have a human review these. We should just have AI do this completely automatically. And in which case, that's when you get to the more agentic systems. Those decisions just should have a little bit more of a rigor to review to ensure they're doing them right before you set them off, some sort of testing and auditing. But, taking a little bit more because the risk that you're exposing there is much higher than, again, versus the cafeteria menu. So again, a lot of the pushback is just this blanket, we can't because of risk, and the idea is take a true risk-based decision. And actually, I think there's a discussion that's coming a little later, I think we're at time, around kind of the White House and the executive orders. And one of the things I'm really inspired by is actually, I think this administration is very focused on that. And they're saying, how shall we encourage agencies to adopt? And if you read the AI action plan, it was very, very clear, a kind of push from the White House to say agencies should really understand how to make this technology available and to start using it. I think they actually used the word mandatory. It will be mandatory for agencies to make tools like this available for employees whose job function would benefit from it. And so I think there's a big push to try to say, where do we remove barriers and bureaucracy where it's not necessarily helping, and sort of continuing to push the adoption and experimentation around this technology.
It's awesome. Thanks, Felipe. Then we have time to get through two more questions very quickly. So let's do executive orders next. Maybe start with you, Bridget. Your thoughts on, like, when you think of it, executive orders, AI, also enterprise software, like what's relevant to you right now that's kind of driving internal conversations?
It is definitely quickly the AI executive order, removing barriers. It's in part of the title of getting it out. But also for us, we're looking at the permitting for data centers, because we are in the process of getting data centers, but then it goes back to the permitting process is one of those very long ones. So we have developed a tool around decreasing the timeline of using permitting, but also ensuring that the environmental impacts are noted. And then lastly, with one of my other hats is from the data aspects of how we're incorporating and ensuring that we're following the Evidence Act as we're implementing some of our AI tools. So yeah, definitely got a lot from the executive orders that we're focusing on over the next few months, and some policies coming out as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So last question, getting contracts awarded. Monica, we were talking about this, and we're, whether it's OpenAI or there's a number of, traditional, non-traditional vendors involved in, delivering AI services and support. We had a couple questions related to using AI for evaluating RFPs and looking at responses. So around like getting contracts awarded to support your mission, what are your thoughts, Monica?
Yeah, well, I know every agency has slightly different processes, on contract awards. So you're speaking generally and kind of what has worked well at NOAA and the Weather Service. First is leveraging contracts you already have. So as I mentioned, we started with Gemini, and that was because we had that contract with Google already. And it was a lot easier to say, okay, let's turn on Gemini within this existing contract. And I'm very excited for the potential for ChatGPT as well coming up. But it might determine where you start based on what contracts you have already. The second is that we really try to explore creative ways to get more tailored AI, through cooperative research agreements, through broad agency announcements, memorandums of understanding, just reaching out to private industry and our academic partners to figure out what's out there. And then, before going down the full contract route, using some of these other ways to do that exploratory work and see, prototype, is this going to work for our use case? Is it not? Do we have the data? Kind of answer those questions. The other aspect with the contract process, I'd say know your IT process really well and keep your IT folks involved throughout the project. So including the contract process. I've seen a number of AI projects get hung up because the IT folks weren't aware of what was going on or were confused or didn't understand. And so bringing those folks on board really helps throughout the whole project, but especially the contract process. And then finally, really articulating upfront how intellectual property will be handled. So this is more for, tailor designed, for specific projects where you're working with a company to, for a specific use case. It's really important to know what the agency will own and what the contractor will own. So for example, if the project involves creating a training data set, you want to know, is the agency going to own that at the end of during the contract and at the end? So, I mean, the contract process can be a challenge, but I've really found the most success with interdisciplinary teams, particularly with AI projects. It just helps get more eyes on the process, and we've had definite success making it happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. We've actually gone 2 minutes over, so I'd love to have everyone respond to this question, but we're at the end of our time. We had a few more topics to get through, but this has been, I feel like we could do a part 2, but this has really been amazing. Thank you, panelists, so much for your time. Felipe, Bridget, Monica, Dr. Iannello. This has been great. Thanks for all the participants who signed up for the webinar. Again, we'll follow up with the rebroadcast, the polling results, along with a summary. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.